Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Light and Justice, How Main Street Lighting Reflects What and Who You Value, brought to you by Connecticut Main Street Center. My name is Kimberly Parsons Whitaker, and I am the interim CEO of Connecticut Main Street Center. Before we begin, just a few words. Connecticut Main Street Center is the expert resource for developing and sustaining vibrant downtowns and main streets that fuel our state's prosperity. Our mission is to assess, to educate, to convene, and to advocate to develop and grow downtowns. Next. We are very grateful to our sponsors and our funding partners. Connecticut Main Street Center's founding sponsors are Eversource and the State of Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development. And our growth sponsors are Avangrid and the Connecticut State Historic Preservation Office. Our educational programs, Main Street Forums for the 21st Century, are sponsored by Webster Bank and Avangrid. We also thank our corporate investor, M&T Bank. And Connecticut Main Street Center has important strategic partnerships, including our partnership with FHI Studio, our AICP certification maintenance provider. And a note to planners today, this webinar is approved for 1 CM credit. Today's webinar is generously sponsored by Penn Globe, Manufacturing Lighting for the Greater Good, a lighting design and manufacturing company located in North Branford, Connecticut. And you can find them at pennglobe.com. So some quick housekeeping notes before we begin. Our webinar will be about 1 hour, and we will stop for questions at the end. So please feel free to type your questions in the chat function as we go along. And you'll receive an evaluation survey shortly after the webinar. Please take a moment to complete this survey as it helps us develop meaningful education programs for you. At Connecticut Main Street Center, we believe that vibrant and sustainable main streets are developed around these 6 components: a unique sense of place, economic vitality, community engagement, and policies that support appropriate growth, equitable places and inclusive practices, sustainable practices and protection of natural resources, and connectivity with a focus on multimodal transit. Today's topic on lighting fits into multiple components. Lighting adds to a sense of place and can connect spaces and people in an inclusive way while following sustainable practices. With that, let me introduce today's esteemed speakers. Edward Bartholomew is the principal of Bartholomew Lighting, a Black-owned design consultancy based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He has over 30 years of experience designing sustainable, inspiring, and award-winning architectural lighting systems. Edward is an invited speaker on lighting technology, energy efficiency strategies, and social justice at regional, national, and international conferences. In addition, Edward co-teaches graduate lighting courses at Morgan State University and at the Rhode Island School of Design. In his practice and advocacy, Edward promotes Light+Justice. And Mark Loeffler retired from active consulting at the end of 2021. Based in the New Haven area, he's dedicated more than 30 years to designing joyful, invigorating, healthful, and sustainable architectural lighting for notable academic, healthcare, research, corporate, institutional, and recreational buildings in the US and around the world. During his career, Mark has written, taught, and lectured widely, which he plans to continue, especially in his advocacy for lighting's role in social and environmental justice. And with that, I want to thank Edward and Mark, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Kim. And Edward, I got to get set up here.
Okay. We want to welcome everyone here, and thank you for inviting us to give this talk. This is a talk that's very near and dear to our hearts, and we've tried to modify and revise it to address some of the concerns for you folks, and we hope that it's received well.
Thank you, Edward. And we're calling it Light Justice for Equitable Revitalization, because light's a powerful symbol of knowledge and truth and justice. It enables us to see, and everyone deserves good light and benevolent darkness. Well-designed, high-quality lighting is a signifier of prosperity and privilege. And good lighting is visually appealing, it's environmentally responsible, and it's socially beneficial. Good lighting, it's a long-term investment in the acceptance and performance and value of a place, a building, and a community. However, light isn't always good. Marginalized communities usually suffer from poor lighting, which is visually distressing. It's environmentally harmful and can be socially detrimental. This is part of infrastructural racism. It's got historic and persistent roots. And by recognizing this inequity, we can begin addressing it with a more inclusive planning and design approach to help revitalize these underserved places with good lighting.
I'm Edward Bartholomew, and Mark and I are both lighting designers. Mark is retired, but he's still a lighting designer at heart. And our role is often to design lighting that is a good investment. But the truth is, the majority of our time and creativity and technology is for the benefit of affluent clients with well-funded projects. Marginalized, under-resourced communities usually suffer from poor lighting because they do not have access to our expertise, knowledge, and products. And worse yet, oppressive lighting is used to reinforce power dynamics. It's a tool for surveillance, policing, and control of the nocturnal behavior in those neighborhoods. And the pattern is pervasive, inequitable, and unjust. We recognize that this is a global problem, but our immediate focus is addressing the lighting inequities that are found here in the public realm in the United States. So light justice is an intrinsic part of environmental and social justice. Now, Mark and I have been friends for over a decade, and we reconnected in the summer of 2020 during the great social justice awakening in the US due to the systemic racism viciously demonstrated by the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and so many other people of color. As one of the very few Black lighting designers in this country, I spoke out on social media to express my concern that our profession, our industry, was ignoring the plight of under-resourced communities, and that lighting was not diverse and inclusive enough to represent those people for whom we serve. This became an ongoing conversation between Mark and I about our mutual concern for lighting quality and inequality, especially in the public realm.
Now, every year, the International Association of Lighting Designers and the Illuminating Engineering Society, professional organizations that both Edward and I belong to, give awards for the best new lighting projects in the world, including many notable public outdoor experiences. And these exemplify the principles of good lighting as desirable placemaking for people's enjoyment. Again, visually appealing, environmentally responsible, and socially beneficial. Now, as lighting designers and we as planners are familiar with these attributes, and we'd like to demonstrate them in all our projects. So a project like this in Washington, D.C. uses lighting to create a shimmering visual effect under a railroad underpass that's enlivening a once threatening pedestrian passageway. And the new Illuminating Engineering Society recommendations for outdoor lighting emphasize visual reassurance, not just safety and security for buildings, but making people feel more comfortable with exterior environments after dark. Now, lighting can be sculptural and playful, but it's all about creating a sense of place and destination that's desirable for gathering. And lighting can be used to warmly illuminate a building that's a focal point in a neighborhood. It also can be used to create an entirely new destination like this waterfront park adjacent to an industrial zone that you can tell in the background isn't quite as nicely illuminated as this one is. Now, these are enlivening, they're joyful, but they can be expensive and elaborate. They're well-funded projects. They're all thoughtfully and carefully designed, installed, controlled, and maintained.
Now, another aspect of lighting also means having beneficial darkness. Darkness that is safe, sheltering, cool, protective, and restorative. And this includes the desirable shade of mature trees, mostly seen in affluent neighborhoods. A joint investigation by NPR and the University of Maryland's Howard Center for Investigative Journalism found a connection between the excessive heat in neighborhoods and income. In 97 of the most populous US cities with low-income areas were found to have more likely to be hotter than their wealthier counterparts. Those poor areas were also disproportionately communities of color. So to quote Richard Rothstein of the Economic Policy Institute, African Americans are restricted to neighborhoods because the other neighborhoods are now unaffordable to them, restricted to neighborhoods where there are fewer trees and where there is more heat.
Well, affluent neighborhoods tend to have appropriate darkness that's balanced with visually comfortable outdoor lighting at night. And marginalized neighborhoods tend to lack that shade and suffer substandard lighting at night, which denies them the benefit of nighttime darkness. And it's getting worse. Light pollution in general has increased. A recent study used satellite imagery to determine that observable light emissions have increased by at least 49% from 1992 to 2017. And to quote anthropologist Celeste Henry of the University of Texas at Austin, many practices of illumination framed by notions of social progress are complicit, if not actively participate, in devitalizing racialization, in a devitalizing racialization of space. Indeed, in the US, the urban poor, the Black and the brown are corralled in inner city by processes of white flight and racial criminalization and have suffered under this trajectory of illumination. And collectively, we appear to be creating a humanity that's slowly cut off from its connection to the wild, to the sensory and the cyclical, to the cosmic, and boldly to each other.
What is unjust lighting? What does unjust lighting look like? When we see it, we cannot unsee it. And when we walk through neighborhoods that are clearly feel uncomfortable or sketchy, we understand exactly, if we look up, how those neighborhoods are being illuminated. We find that unjust lighting can be visually intrusive, environmentally detrimental, can be socially negative, so that we no longer see people's faces, but lighting is focused on a road or on property. Indeed, in prioritizing property and roads over people.
The more that Edward and I looked at this problem, the more obvious it became to us that bad, unjust lighting is sadly common, and that social scientists and public health experts and environmental advocates are actually way ahead of the lighting industry in observing and quantifying this problem of systemic infrastructural discrimination and negligence. Unjust lighting goes along with things like potholes and poor drainage and missing sidewalks and other public blights that plague these communities. And to quote political scientist Isabella Creatura, light's ability to characterize space as either appealing or unappealing further divisions that which already exist between rich and poor.
And there's a historical legacy regarding this unjust lighting. One of the legacies is actually something called lantern laws, which represent the earliest attempt to use light or nighttime to suppress, at nighttime, to suppress Black bodies through racialized surveillance. Simone Brown's book, Dark Matter, states, lantern laws were 18th century laws in both New York City and in Boston that demanded that Black, mixed race, or indigenous enslaved people had to carry candle lanterns with them if they walked about the city after sunset and not in the company of a white person. And this law prescribes various punishments for those who didn't carry this supervisory device. And any person was literally deputized to stop those who walked about without a lit candle after dark. Now, another historical way that nighttime behavior has been oppressed are sundown towns. These were all white communities, typically in neighborhoods or counties that excluded Blacks and other minorities through the use of discriminatory laws, both through harassment and threats and the use of violence in order to control their nocturnal behavior, to keep people out of these neighborhoods at night. The name derives from the posted and verbal warnings issued to Blacks that although they might be allowed to work or travel in the community during the daytime, they must leave at sundown. Historians estimate there are over 10,000 sundown towns, many of them in the Midwest, but also in the Northeast, such as Massachusetts and Connecticut. Now, the Green Book, the movie that many of you saw, the Green Book was actually a book that was published guide for African Americans to help them navigate the country and avoid sundown towns and find friendly lodging and places to eat. So this leads us to today, where you can see the legal framework for oppressing policies like stop and frisk policing policies that were established long before our contemporary era. An egregious example of this is called Omnipresence. It is literally happening right now, today, in New York City, through the New York City Police Program, which installed diesel-generated powered floodlights on poles in quote-unquote dangerous parts of the city. These are mostly housing developments in Black and brown communities, both in Brooklyn and one or two in Manhattan itself. This represents the most egregious examples of using light to oppress people and community by creating unequal and unjust lighting. Is light pollution, it's noise pollution, and air pollution. As the Brownsville housing residents describe it, it's overwhelming. The light shines through people's rooms, making it hard for them to sleep. They never turn off at night, and the buzz for the generators never stops. Now, one of the causes of these inequities and inequalities was redlighting. And that was a practice that started in the 1930s. It characterized certain neighborhoods or areas of high credit risk, often on the basis of race or ethnicity of those who lived there, and subsequently denying loan applications from creditworthy borrowers simply because they live in those neighborhoods. Now, while the practice was outlawed in 1968, its effects have been passed down over the years and continue to build in the form of gaps in wealth and home ownership inequality. 3 out of the 4 neighborhoods redlined on government maps 80 years ago that continue to struggle economically.
Now, this is a redlining map of New Haven, Connecticut, the area where I'm based, and it's one of the oldest cities in the United States. It was the first to be planned. It's organized around 9 squares with a central common green that was meant to benefit all residents. It's home to Yale University. It's been a sanctuary city since 2017. It's considered very progressive, but it too has historically suffered from severe redlining and segregation like many cities in the United States. This segregation actually persists today. These neighborhoods are encroached upon by industrial sites and intentionally cut off from downtown by highways constructed in the 1950s. And when Edward and I started talking about lighting and justice, we wondered if nighttime satellite images might correlate light pollution with redline neighborhoods. And to a certain extent, it does. By overlaying a night sky satellite image, you can begin to see how lighting has reinforced this discrimination in New Haven, as well as most cities. The lighting differences are pretty remarkable. New Haven's downtown shopping districts are pleasantly lighted. In fact, I've helped with some of those lighting improvement projects, and it provides that desirable visual reassurance. However, New Haven's redline districts are obviously badly illuminated. Just east of downtown at Interstate 91, the multicultural Fairhaven neighborhood is overwhelmed by unshielded floodlighting that's been installed on utility poles and industrial buildings to supposedly protect property and prevent crime. And just west of downtown, the historically Black neighborhood, known as the Hill, is flooded by high output LED Cobra heads that are meant for streetlights and cars, but not pedestrians. Like most communities of color, New Haven's marginalized neighborhoods get stigmatized as, quote, high crime areas. And as I've been told, they are intentionally overlighted by property owners, the police department, and the electric utility to discourage nighttime activity instead of making it more visually comfortable.
So we wonder, why does this persist? What is going on? What is driving the overlighting of these neighborhoods? Well, crime is a leading excuse for overlighting urban environments. Lighting is seen as the leading solution for reducing urban crime. It is considered a quote unquote target hardening, a crime prevention principle that increases visibility of potential crime targets, i.e. property and buildings. Newspapers and media have run with this cost-effective crime preventing solution of more lighting, and specifically brighter LED lighting. Well, it's the easiest, most visual solution for politicians that they can point to and use to appease a community burdened by crime. And one recent study is used to justify the solution. It's the University of Chicago's Crime Lab study from 2019, Reducing Crime Through Environmental Design, Evidence from a Randomized Experiment of Street Lighting in New York City. This study concluded that accounting conservatively for potential spillover, street lighting reduces outdoor nighttime index crimes, those are the most egregious crimes, by approximately 36%. But this 2019 study was based on the previously mentioned New York City Police Department's Omnipresence program. So you really need to consider the data from where these crime studies are coming from. So even though the study appears to be very statistically rigorous, the fact is it used a very oppressive intervention that is perceived by its own residents as hostile and stigmatizing. Even though they can justify a cost-benefit ratio supposedly of lighting of being 4-to-1 for this temporary solution, that means for every dollar spent, they expect $4 in benefits. That ratio is clearly a better ratio than what we would do with incarceration without the collateral cost. But investment in permanent just lighting may offer better lasting collateral benefits to the community beyond these temporary hostile lighting interventions. But what is unjust light? Lighting that is weaponized to control and subjugate residents in poor communities. In her 2020 article, Defending Black Lives Means Banning Facial Recognition, social justice advocate Twani Petty writes, Black communities who have been under-resourced and ignored for decades want to be seen and not watched.
And this is an environmental justice issue with a long history. Environmental justice is an important part of the struggle to improve and maintain a clean and healthful environment, especially for those who have traditionally lived and worked and played nearest to the sources of pollution, such as a landfill or an industrial plant, a truck depot. This is called environmental racism. And to quote the father of the environmental justice movement, Dr. Robert Bullard, quote, "It is the right of all individuals to have a safe, clean, livable, and sustainable environment. The goal is to not allow artificial characteristics such as race, class, or geography to impede that right." Now, the Environmental Protection Agency defines the environmental justice challenges that impact communities of color. And this list includes lead contamination, unhealthy drinking water, dangerous air quality, and hazardous waste site exposure. But overexposure to harmful lighting is not listed. And that raises urgent questions about how we as lighting professionals can understand and address these environmental justice inequities. How is this rooted in historic intentional segregation and suppression? How do those roots persist today? And what are its consequences?
Light pollution is inequitable. In a landmark study called Light Pollution Inequities in the Continental United States, a distributive environmental justice analysis, researchers, many from the University of Utah, conclude that light pollution is an emergent environmental health hazard. It states that Hispanic, Black, Asian, and multi-other race residents, as well as low to mid socioeconomic status residential areas, are exposed to more light at night than affluent neighborhoods. The researchers identified 3 possible reasons for these findings. And the way they were able to determine these findings was actually by looking at satellite imagery at these areas and then drilling deep down into the demographics, neighborhood by neighborhood, address by address, understanding the economics. And they allowed for even discrepancies between rural and urban as well. So they found that there was greater light pollution in Black and brown communities. And they think that one of the ideas that may cause this is zoning, where disadvantaged areas, poorer neighborhoods are also zoned along with industrial areas. Second, that affluent neighborhoods, predominantly white communities, have embraced darkness as an amenity, as something positive. And third, again, the US society has long criminalized particular racial and ethnic minority groups. And it's possible that this has served to justify the deployment of greater artificial lighting in socially disadvantaged neighborhoods as a means to support nighttime policing and surveillance by law enforcement authorities.
And according to the International Dark Sky Association, light pollution is getting rapidly worse as LED outdoor lighting proliferates around the world. And not only is light pollution bad for obscuring the night sky and for disrupting animal behavior, light pollution is a public health hazard for humans as well. Environmentalists and medical researchers now consider light pollution to be one of the fastest growing and most pervasive forms of environmental pollution. And while a few of these studies have been challenged by lighting researchers, some are raising important questions we need to consider. For example, a study found possible links between excessive outdoor lighting at night and breast cancer. It looked at comprehensive data for more than 100,000 women across the United States enrolled from 1989 to 2013. The researchers were able to link satellite images of Earth taken at nighttime to the residential addresses for each study participant. And it found that the top 20% of women exposed to the highest levels of outdoor light at night had an estimated 14% increased risk of breast cancer, as compared to women in the bottom 20% of exposure to nighttime lighting, mostly in suburban and rural areas. The study also considered the compounding of night shift work. These workers often live in those same overlighted neighborhoods, and they never escape artificial lighting or have the opportunity to enjoy comfortable darkness.
When we look at both the physical harm that light pollution can cause, it also causes mental harm. In a 2020 cross-sectional nationally representative survey of US adolescents, they found that higher levels of outdoor artificial light at night, measured via satellite again, were associated with later weeknight bedtimes for those in the lower quartile of nighttime light. Reported the longest weeknight sleep durations. So sleep is being disrupted in these communities, these underserved communities, and is impacting their sleep, which impacts their behavior. Adolescents in these areas, these overlit areas with greater levels of nighttime light, had higher prevalence of mood and anxiety disorders. Now, clearly, future studies are needed to investigate whether interventions designed to reduce the brightness or spectral composition of outdoor lighting could benefit the mental and sleep health among youth, especially those who already face many social disadvantages. So research has confirmed what we already know. Marginalized Black and brown communities experience more overlighting, and it has a negative consequence for people's physical and mental health, for their communities and the environment.
We know that light has power, and we also know that most people take their outdoor lighting for granted. They don't realize that these systems are designed.
So again, to quote Antoinette de Carroll of the Creative Reaction Lab, systems of oppression, injustices, and inequities are designed, and therefore they could be redesigned. So what are some of the solutions that we can do to address these inequities in illumination?
Well, to overcome systemically unjust lighting, it seems that we need to rebalance the lighting design process and rethink the lighting designer's role. In the book, Design Justice, published by MIT Press in 2020, the author, Sasha Costanza-Chock, says, quote, we see the role of designer as a facilitator rather than an expert. They may not be the only expert at the table. Now, too often, we as lighting designers are asked to jump in during a schematic design phase after all the critical decisions have been made. And then we have to play the role of lighting authority. We're prescribing solutions based on our expertise and our experience, but we're prescribing solutions that are not necessarily rooted in the specific concerns of neighborhood stakeholders. And this results in what I've been calling lighting authoritarianism, with us dictating a design without adequate community input or engagement.
It seems like the process has removed us from having a direct contact and input from stakeholders. Design Justice is also an organization. It's not just a book, and it reimagines this design process centering people who are normally marginalized by design, and uses collaborative creative practices to address the deepest challenges that these communities face. Now, based on these simple, strong principles applicable to the process of lighting design, some of the principles are engage, listen, and when appropriate, educate the community as stakeholders. Change the hierarchy from lighting expert to citizen expert, and welcome their input. Research and identify historical and environmental inequities in those neighborhoods, and share that knowledge generously. And design and specify with integrity.
And we're so pleased to be speaking with you today, because these ideas and principles correlate so closely with the Main Street America 4-point approach to economic vitality, promotion, and organization that are all based in the idea of community engagement. And it's also interesting to us that the logo for Main Street America includes a traditional street lantern. It signifies the importance of lighting for downtown revitalization, just like this image of Juneau, Alaska, which is a Main Street America city that needs good lighting for most of the year. And they've demonstrated that by installing new dark sky friendly street lighting that's using warm color temperature, 3000 Kelvin instead of the cool white 4000 degree lighting that you see in so many places. And it's obviously warm and inviting. It's a successful use of light in revitalizing this downtown, which we would hope they would extend to neighboring areas that might not have access to such good lighting.
And it looks good. It looks good during the day, and it functions really well at night. So there are other design models that can also be deployed in the lighting design process. So we want to highlight some of those folks who are already doing some of this work in lighting design. So we look at urban lighting as a process. NightSeeing is a program run by lighting designer Lynn, who opens people's eyes to an existing nighttime light environment, including understanding lighting systems and its effects. She's also part of the International Nighttime Design Initiative, which is a consortium of 30 interdisciplinary academics and professionals who are applying vision skills and know-how to develop a holistic design practice to urban lighting design. These efforts are happening both in Europe, but actually throughout the world. And their efforts support the Women Taking Back the Night, which intersects perfectly with the support of urban and marginalized communities. Another model is the community-friendly lighting program. That is led by my friend and colleague, Bob Parks, and it's a street lighting design process that starts with public outreach and engagement. Bob strongly recommends mock-ups, hands-on lighting demonstrations to show how new lighting technology can reduce glare, improve color rendition, minimize sky glow, and increase the visual comfort while engaging the community in this hands-on process to show them how it can beautify their neighborhoods through lighting.
And gladly, the more we look for lighting justice, the more we're finding wonderful opportunities and really good success stories. And we know that community engagement works. The images on the screen have to do with an effort in 2014 in London by the London School of Economics and the Social Light Movement. They brought together 25 lighting designers and architects and planners and social scientists for a week-long workshop with 1,200 residents of the mixed income White Cross housing estate in London. And their aim was to explore how social research can help designers, urban designers and lighting designers understand those outdoor spaces and what the residents need in order to improve the nighttime quality of the estate. And before this interaction, the residents said that they thought of their bad lighting, seen on the left side of the screen, as unchangeable as the asphalt on the driveway or the bricks on the building. But by engaging and enabling residents to manipulate and actually play with lighting, they could then begin to articulate their preferences and help the design team to develop a better lighting approach based on a common understanding of the joyful possibilities of better lighting.
Another project that exemplifies this is actually a retrofit project. It's called the Chicago Smart Lighting Program. And this works on a massive scale in the city of Chicago in 2014 with a partnership with the Ameresco, a large energy service company. They replaced or refurbished nearly 300,000 street and sidewalk luminaires or lighting with LED technology. And that all this technology met the new IES outdoor lighting standards. So they were meeting current standards, and you can see the difference from the revitalized lighting from the lighting above that is both glary and produces light pollution. Now the program prioritizes lighting improvements first. It started in historically underserved South and West Chicago by employing local contractors and electricians. And what's great about this, they actually included job recruiting and training for that area, for the residents in that area, including many formerly incarcerated folks. And the results was a well-illuminated city, saving on energy and maintenance while investing in the increased value and worth of those neighborhoods. So we look at these kind of private-public partnerships, such as the effort through the Biden administration, like Build Back Better, where infrastructural funding is an opportunity to revitalize underserved communities with quality lighting design. Now, the funding should be based on community impact, not just reducing energy or maintenance costs. And the use of LED retrofits in projects from energy savings could be utilized in the reduced maintenance costs, could be reinvested in the community and community-led improvements. So we could actually have better quality lighting through the reinvestment of those funds. And we could create a community designated areas for retail or gatherings that are well-designed and promote neighborhood cohesion. We could create pedestrian-friendly neighborhoods with really nice destinations by responding to what the community wants. Where do they want to go at night? Where do they want to feel safe?
And at a much smaller scale, New Haven's Town Green District, which is a public-private partnership, I teamed with a local lighting design firm, and I was part of the team, to plan lighting upgrades for urban pocket parks and underused pedestrian corridors. Now, based on workshops with neighborhood residents, we learned about their concerns and answered their questions about lighting, so that then as funding becomes available, these improvements have begun to focus on increasing the liveliness and sparkle of pedestrian gathering areas, but at a pedestrian scale. So in the beginning, this little Orange Street connector was really illuminated for cars and fairly threatening for pedestrians. But now, taking some of our advice, the street lighting has been changed to warm 3000 Kelvin LEDs, and storefronts, even storefronts that are usually dark at night, have been illuminated to bring some of that brightness and that sparkle onto the sidewalk, and increasing the liveliness and the desirability of this stretch of downtown.
Yeah, and I love how it looks, both pedestrian friendly, looks like a great place just to hang out and be. And it looks like these people are really both enjoying both the lighting, but they don't notice the lighting because it's so comfortable, which is exactly how it should be. Another great project that is being developed right now and is currently in this process through a process of focused listening, research, and urban analysis is called Signal Station North. It's both a conceptual idea and a practical public space lighting plan for the Station North district in Baltimore, Maryland. Now, this is a collaboration between the Neighborhood Design Center, which is a public space planning process, but also a space planning group that resulted in a document titled Public Space Station North Arts District, with an eye toward envisioning healthy, inclusive public spaces. And to quote Glenn Schrum of the Flux Studios, who was the lighting designer working on this project, why create a plan around public space lighting? It is common to find planning documents that address transportation and green space or the streetscape, and yet there are very few examples of plans that focus specifically on lighting infrastructure. Light is a part of the public realm that we often overlook. It is most evident in its absence, or is often observed, as we often observe in the Signal Station North, in its overabundance. The light supports our experience in public space in ways obvious and less obvious. It lights our way, yes, but it can also help us keep time, create a sense of place, and serve as a guidepost. And just as light can invite us in, it can also keep us out. Like so many aspects of the built environment, light both holds power and reveals power structures. So what I love about this project is how they engaged the community in so many different ways. They had meetings where they invited the input from many different community members to come in and provide input about where do they want to go at night? What do they value at night? If without any restrictions and they could walk anywhere, how would that look? They did not necessarily directly ask lighting questions, but what they did is they educated folks about lighting by creating these guides, a guide to noticing light in the neighborhood. And so by these interactions with the community, they both were able to support and empower the community stakeholders and educate them so that they could articulate these ideas around lighting. This is actually an example of some of the free brochures. They actually put them in some of the free newspaper boxes that were in the neighborhood so that people could pick them out and they could understand both the lighting and understand how to articulate ideas regarding lighting, basic concepts regarding color temperature or color rendering or glare, all those things. And then they also created a brochure that helped people navigate how to get better lighting in their neighborhood, how to navigate talking to the utility, who do you talk to in government in order to get a response from the utility in order to change the lighting in their neighborhoods. So that was a twofold effort, both educating them about lighting and educating them about the government infrastructure in order to get better quality lighting. And they were very effective. And again, these were distributed for free and they're also available on the web. So through these great process, the project scope is carried out over a 2-year timeline and incorporated 3 key phases, both of planning, which included the urban analysis, a deep analysis of current lighting conditions, and community listening. Now, implementation is still underway. There are actually 3 demonstration lighting projects that have been funded, and they're sharing their findings with the Station North and the Baltimore community to support a broad understanding of and have an engagement with the city's lighting infrastructure so that utilities and government officials can be part of the process as well and can support the community in improving the lighting in these communities. So Signal Station North is a great example of how this engagement can actually work in a very positive way.
And so we've come up with a few ways that we think you can make a positive difference.
Ensure your current lighting improvement projects cause no environmental or social harm.
And deliberately seek out projects that benefit under-resourced communities.
Engage a lighting designer early for planning and stakeholder interaction before even starting the design.
And get out there and encourage your municipality or your electric utility to support outdoor lighting quality standards and light pollution or trespass mitigation measures that benefit everyone. Now, we truly believe that everyone is worthy of good lighting, and that good lighting cannot continue to be a privilege only for the prosperous. We must deliberately invest in lighting reparations and revitalization for underserved and poorly illuminated communities to overcome systemic oppression.
And it must be based on a more inclusive planning and design process that engages the community and prioritizes the visual and environmental quality. It must be part of a comprehensive investment in infrastructural improvements for historically marginalized neighborhoods. This investment will prove its worth in providing a more equitable and sustainable prosperity and lighting justice.
So thank you so much for joining us today. Edward, do you want to?
Well, I just want to announce the launch of our new website. And so we've developed an organization basically through this website called LightJusticeorg. And it serves both as a resource and a forum, a resource of gaining tools in order to work directly with stakeholders and do projects that are more community engaged, a forum for lighting designers to come together and share tools and ideas and projects and case studies so that we could continually improve upon this process. And it's myself, Mark, and Leah Osborne who are part of this organization, and we have some great advisors as well, including some of the people we've actually mentioned in this presentation, who are contributing and are kind of helping us. But we are excited about this new effort of LightJustice.org.
So thank you again, and we hope that this presentation helps you see opportunities for you to apply some of this new lighting knowledge for the just and equitable revitalization of your towns. So with that, let's talk.
Thank you so much, Edward Bartholomew and Mark Loeffler. We so appreciate this. This is, amazing stuff to think about, and what's fantastic about it is how well it aligns with everything that we do in Main Street. You're absolutely right. This all fits together. So I know we had a fairly active chat box this morning, which is wonderful. So I'm going to turn it over to Christine Schilke, our communications and strategy director, because she's going to lay out some questions that have been asked of us.
So to echo Kim, thank you for your presentation. I personally find this so fascinating and enlightening, and I really appreciated a lot of the way you talked about it as light being joyful and sparkling, but also bringing attention to beneficial darkness, which I think is a particular area that doesn't get recognized or talked about enough, and it's so critically important to our personal and communal and planetary health. So I personally found that to be one of my favorite parts. But as Kim said, we did have some comments and questions in the chat box. So first, I'd just like to recognize that Doug Hasleden, sorry, Doug, is on here from the city of New Haven, and he can be a resource. Mention some specifics in New Haven. He works with the city and can answer any particular question you have, or if you want some additional examples. But CJ had a question wondering how we can harness the recent push by many municipalities to replace streetlights with LED, with the reasons for the shift appearing to align mostly with budgets and energy costs rather than with quality or aesthetic improvements. So can you maybe talk about that a little bit?
Sure, and Doug, it's great to have you on. I've done lots of work with mostly Giovanni Zen, but anyway, and Edward will jump in here too. But the main thing with LED replacement projects is, and Edward mentioned this in one of his comments, is that you really need to think about the visual quality of the lighting that you're improving, and making sure that you're not inadvertently overlighting in the replacement process. There's also lots of information out there. the sort of the first and second generations of LED replacement projects focused on making it look like cool white metal halide, which was the technology most of the time they were replacing, and using high color temperature, very cool light that we now know dark sky folks have really studied this closely, and we know that that is actually much more harmful to both dark sky goals, animal behavior, and it tends to interrupt human circadian patterns much worse than warmer color temperature 2700 and 3000, which I mentioned in a few things. And so it's mostly about taking care that you're not just replacing things for the reasons of maintenance, but considering the lighting quality as you go along. That's where, because once you've made that investment, you're locked in for another 20 or so years before you're going to replace that again.
And I think I worked at a utility here in Massachusetts, and a lot of the choices that were made were mostly about saving energy and maintenance. Let's say a lot of municipalities really focused on maintenance more than anything. What we truly need is deeper community engagement. A lot of the people who were doing those LED replacements did not even visit those communities, did not even walk in those communities, had no idea. They were doing it all virtually based on plans and based on utility inventories of where lighting was. They were doing one-for-one replacement, typically rule of thumb. They did not even check to see if those communities had changed, if what's underneath those lamps, those lights had, what had changed in those communities, how was that space being utilized differently? How are those communities, morphed and changed as well? So that type of hands-off approach is not conducive to having a good community engaged lighting at all. You simply cannot do that. You need to get into the community. You need to talk to people. You need to listen and not just talk. But you need to find out where people are coming from and understand their community, and then apply lighting. And in that way, not just focus on roadways, but also look at pedestrian, scaled lighting, how to make those communities be part of a revitalization effort, so that they can also come out and be a part of main streets as well. They have their own internal main streets and places that they enjoy going to. And so we need to understand those values of those communities and light accordingly in that way. So it's a longer, it's a probably more expensive process, but it's definitely more rewarding. And to Mark's point, these solutions will last 20 years. So you could have 20 years of crappy lighting or 20 years of having really positive community impact.
And I think you had mentioned before that there's some additional opportunities now for that investment with Build Back Better and some of that infrastructure.
Yeah,
but if it's done right,
Yeah.
If they just do it the same way they've been doing it, and trust me, I've worked with a lot of ESCOs and stuff like that, and they have no interest in, many of them have no interest in directly working with communities. So we need to change that from a policy standpoint. Municipalities need to demand that people engage with those communities, work with them, create listening sessions, and that needs to be built into the process.
Those are great points, and I think actually might play into the next question, which is about working with state departments of transportation, because a lot of our main streets have a state road that is their main street. And so how can we, working with organizations like Connecticut DOT, balance lighting for people with creating beautifully lit physical environments?
Well, that one's actually, I would say, the burden really falls to you guys, because you're going to know about these things before a lighting designer is ever, even considered. So taking this newfound knowledge and asking some questions about, what are the CDOT standards and how do those correlate with your knowledge, or what you can find by doing some of the research, whether it's through LightJusticeorg or send us an email or whatever. But finding out what they plan to do or what their standards are, because what we find as lighting designers is that often the least progressive players are the ones, you know, the code officials and the State Departments that have these, you know, deeply held, long time standards that we need to shake up a little bit for reasons of, you know, light pollution and circadian health.
Absolutely.
So you guys should be the advocates and find ways to bring lighting experts into the picture as soon as you can.
And that needs to be built into your RFPs and RFQs, and everything needs, at a policy level, we need to be baked into that process. And not just lighting designers, but even looking at, you know, look at the Chicago project and how they actually had people from the community working on that project. What a wonderful win-win for everybody, so that people actually have good jobs, they're able to maintain those systems, and the community wins in that way. So the investment stays in the communities and doesn't go outside those communities.
I'm looking at the time and we are running short, but we have some more questions. So I just want to let everyone know that if we didn't get to questions, I think what we'll do is we'll ask Mark and Edward if they could provide responses, and then we'll include kind of the chat write-up and answers with the recording information.
Yeah, we would love to respond to emails, so feel free.
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much. We're going to close it out very briefly. I just want to let you know that the Connecticut Main Street Network extends throughout our state. So we're talking about, when we're talking about our role as advocates and working with ConnDOT and others, it's a large network in Connecticut. It includes professionally managed downtowns and neighborhood districts, as well as municipal planning and economic development departments, and 2 regional organizations representing the interests of many towns. We also have a professional affiliate membership program for industry professionals. And this network provides our communities with access to specialized expertise relevant to downtown revitalization. Please do visit ctmainstreet.org for our library of archived webinars, such as this one, a directory of our professional affiliate network, and our small business library that provides great business advice for your merchants. And once again, we want to thank, first and foremost, our presenters, Edward Bartholomew and Mark Loeffler, as well as our sponsors and our program partners. So thank you very, very much for joining us today. And thank you, Edward and Mark.
Thank you. And I want to thank Pin Globe especially for their contribution and sponsorship. Thank you.
Thank you.